September 11th, 2001, United States. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, the United States faced the deadliest terrorist attack in modern history. 4 commercial airplanes were hijacked by 19 al-Qaeda operatives in a coordinated suicide mission aimed at striking key American landmarks. At 8:46 a.m., the first plane crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. 17 minutes later, a second plane hit the South Tower, while a third struck the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The fourth plane, United 93, believed to be headed toward either the White House or the U.S. Capitol, was overtaken by brave passengers and crashed into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The results were catastrophic. Nearly 2,977 people lost their lives, including airline passengers, office workers, firefighters, police officers, and bystanders. Over 25,000 were injured, and the destruction caused lasting health issues for first responders. The collapse of both towers happened live on television, shocking people around the globe and triggering an international outcry. Al-Qaeda claimed the attack was revenge for U.S. military presence in the Middle East, but the consequences reached far wider. The U.S. launched the War on Terror, invading Afghanistan just weeks later and Iraq 2 years after. Domestically, surveillance laws like the Patriot Act were passed, airport security was overhauled, and public attitudes towards safety, privacy, and religion changed radically. With over 800,000 deaths later linked to resulting conflicts and trillions spent on military campaigns, 9/11 became a turning point for global geopolitics. Decades later, its emotional and political impact is still felt worldwide. 2008 Mumbai Attacks, India. On November 26, 2008, the city of Mumbai, India, became the target of one of the most terrifying terrorist attacks in modern history. Over the course of 60 hours, 10 heavily armed members of the Pakistani-based militant group Lashkar-e-Taiba carried out a coordinated assault across multiple high-profile locations in Mumbai. These included the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, Oberoi Trident Hotel, the city's main railway station, CST, a Jewish cultural center, Chabad House, and a bustling cafe popular with tourists. The attackers used automatic rifles, grenades, and IEDs to create chaos and maximize casualties. Their goals were clear: mass fear, maximum destruction, and international headlines. By the time the ordeal ended, over 175 people were dead, including foreign nationals, policemen, hotel staff, and innocent civilians. More than 300 were injured. The scale of the operation stunned the world. It felt more like urban warfare than a terror strike. Many civilians were held hostage. Execution-style killings were caught on security cameras, and intense gun battles between attackers and police played out live on TV. Shockingly, Indian intelligence intercepted chilling phone conversations between the terrorists and their remote handlers in Pakistan, revealing step-by-step instructions given during the rampage. The lone surviving attacker, Ajmal Kasab, was captured, tried, and later executed. The Mumbai attacks exposed major failures in intelligence, surveillance, and border security, and left lasting scars on India's national psyche. It also escalated tensions between India and Pakistan and 4 cities worldwide to rethink urban terror response strategies. Even years later, its brutality and precision serve as a chilling reminder of what modern terrorism looks like. 3. Paris Attacks, November 13, 2015, France. On the night of November 13, 2015, Paris was rocked by a series of brutal, coordinated terrorist attacks that left 130 people dead and more than 400 injured. Planned and carried out by militants linked to the Islamic State, ISIS, the assault targeted soft civilian areas to spread fear and chaos. The attacks began outside the Stade de France, where suicide bombers detonated devices near a packed international soccer match attended by the French president. Not long after, armed gunmen opened fire on patrons dining peacefully at multiple cafés and restaurants throughout the city. But the deadliest scene unfolded inside the Bataclan concert hall, where 3 attackers stormed a live show and began an indiscriminate massacre. 90 people were killed in the concert hall alone. Hostages were taken. Escape routes blocked. Witnesses later described the horrifying calm with which the attackers moved room to room. The entire operation was synchronized and highly organized, exposing major weaknesses in European counter-terror coordination. Several attackers had traveled in and out of Syria, exploiting refugee routes and slipping through European borders. The attacks were not only the worst on French soil since World War II, but also a clear signal that Europe was vulnerable to the kind of terror tactics once seen only in war zones. France declared a national state of emergency, launched airstrikes on ISIS targets in Raqqa, Syria, and passed sweeping security laws. The Paris attacks forced Europe to confront the new face of terrorism: domestic radicalization, mobile sleeper cells, and the psychological warfare of turning everyday places into battleground. Madrid Train Bombings. March 11, 2004, Spain. On the morning of March 11, 2004, at the height of rush hour, Madrid was shaken by a devastating series of coordinated bombings targeting 4 packed commuter trains. In less than 3 minutes, 10 bombs exploded at Atocha station and other nearby stops, killing 193 people and injuring over 2,000. Most of the victims were ordinary citizens, students, workers, immigrants, on their way to school or jobs. The attack, carried out by an Islamist extremist cell inspired by Al-Qaeda, remains the deadliest terror attack in modern Spanish history. Originally, the Spanish government blamed Basque separatist group ETA, but within days, evidence surfaced linking the attacks to Islamic militants. This sparked mass protests, outrage, and a political firestorm. The country was just 3 days away from a national election, and public opinion quickly turned against the ruling party, which was accused of deliberately misleading the public. The opposition won in a dramatic upset. Beyond the political fallout, the Madrid bombings were Europe's wake-up call. Often described as Europe's 9/11, the attack exposed the growing threat of homegrown radicalization and the vulnerabilities of open public transit systems. Authorities later discovered audio and writings from the attackers expressing anger over Spain's participation in the Iraq War, which they claimed had provoked their violent response. Spain responded with new anti-terror laws, improved intelligence sharing, and more robust public security efforts. But for the people of Madrid, March 11th became a painful reminder that terror doesn't need planes or borders to strike at the heart of everyday life. Beslan School Siege, 2004, Russia. On September 1st, 2004, the first day of school in Beslan, North Ossetia, turned into a nightmare. Over 30 heavily armed militants, comprised of Chechen separatists and Islamist extremists, stormed School No. 1 during a celebration filled with students, teachers, and parents. They took over 1,100 people hostage, most of them children, and herded them into a cramped gymnasium rigged with explosives. Demanding the withdrawal of Russian forces from Chechnya, the attackers began a brutal standoff with authorities that lasted nearly 3 full days. Hostages were denied food and water. Children fainted from heat. Some were forced to stand at windows as human shields. On day 3, chaos erupted when explosions detonated inside the gym, prompting Russian special forces to storm the building. What followed was pure horror, a fierce gunfight, collapsing walls, and a death toll the nation wasn't prepared for. By the end, over 330 people were dead, including 186 children. Hundreds more were wounded. The school was nearly destroyed. The screams of survivors echoed long after the gunfire stopped. The Beslan siege shocked the world not just for its cruelty, but for the disastrous response. Russian officials were accused of mishandling negotiations, delaying rescue operations, and using excessive force, including tanks and flamethrowers, even as hostages were trapped inside. The tragedy exposed deep failures in Russia's counterterrorism tactics, raised urgent questions about intelligence gaps, and left behind a grieving, traumatized community. Years later, few events are as burned into global memory, or as symbolic of the indiscriminate cruelty of terrorism, as the day children became targets in Beslan. Oklahoma City bombing, 1995, United States. On the morning of April 19, 1995, a massive explosion ripped through the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people, including 19 children in a daycare center. The blast injured over 600 more and reduced 1/3 of the 9-story building to rubble. It was the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in U.S. history, planned and executed not by foreign extremists, but by American citizens. The attack was carried out by Timothy McVeigh, a former U.S. Army soldier, along with co-conspirator Terry Nichols. Using a rented Ryder truck packed with nearly 5,000 pounds of explosives, McVeigh detonated the bomb at 9:02 a.m., a calculated statement of rage against the U.S. government. He claimed the bombing was revenge for the government's handling of the Waco siege, exactly 2 years earlier, and what he saw as unconstitutional overreach. McVeigh's background mattered. Disillusioned by the Gulf War, radicalized by anti-government ideologies, and obsessed with the Turner Diaries, a racist, extremist novel, he believed he was striking a blow for patriotism. Instead, he sparked a national reckoning. The country was horrified. The thought that such destruction came from within its own borders shook Americans to the core. McVeigh was arrested within 90 minutes, tried, and executed in 2001. Nichols received life in prison. The Oklahoma City bombing reshaped how the U.S. handles domestic extremism, spotlighted the rise of militia movements, and led to tougher laws on terrorism and explosives. Decades later, It serves as a chilling reminder that not all acts of terror come from outside threats. Some are born at home. Christchurch mosque shootings, 2019, New Zealand. On March 15, 2019, New Zealand faced its darkest day when a heavily armed gunman opened fire inside two mosques in the city of Christchurch, killing 51 worshippers and injuring 40 others during Friday prayers. The attacker, Brenton Tarrant, was a 28-year-old Australian national driven by white supremacist and anti-immigrant ideology. What set this massacre apart was not only its brutality, but how it was orchestrated to go viral. Tarrant livestreamed the attack on Facebook using a head-mounted camera, turning real-world violence into online propaganda, a first in mass shooting history. Moments before, he posted a 74-page manifesto filled with racist, neo-fascist, and anti-Muslim beliefs, inspired in part by other far-right terrorists, including Norway's Anders Breivik. The first location targeted was Al-Noor Mosque, where most of the deaths occurred. He then drove to Linwood Islamic Center and continued the rampage. The horror shocked the world. Victims included men, women, children, and even refugees who had fled violence in other parts of the world. In a stunning response, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern labeled it a terrorist act, and within just weeks, the government passed sweeping gun law reforms, banning most semi-automatic weapons and initiating a nationwide buyback program. Tarrant was arrested on the day of the attack, later pleaded guilty to all charges, and received life in prison without parole, the first such sentence handed down in New Zealand. The attack served as a grim reminder of how online radicalization, hate speech, and live-streaming tech can amplify hate on a global scale and force countries worldwide to reevaluate how fast terrorism is evolving. Bataclan Concert Hall, part of Paris' 2015 attacks. On November 13, 2015, during a sold-out rock concert at the Bataclan Concert Hall in Paris, music turned into massacre. Just after 9:40 p.m., 3 gunmen affiliated with ISIS stormed the venue, armed with assault rifles and explosive vests, and opened fire on the crowd during a performance by the American Band Eagles of death metal. What followed was one of the most horrifying mass killings in France's history, and the deadliest part of that night's coordinated terrorist attacks across the city. As bullets rained down, panic spread instantly. Some concertgoers ran, others dropped to the floor and played dead. The attackers methodically moved through the orchestra floor and balconies, executing people at close range. They took hostages, wired the entrances with bombs, and threatened mass detonation. The siege lasted over 2 hours, ending only when French special forces stormed the building. 89 people were killed, and hundreds more were wounded or traumatized. Of all the locations attacked that night, Bataclan stood out, not just for the death toll, but for its symbolism. A place of music, joy, and freedom became a target of ideological hatred. In their manifesto, the attackers claimed the audience had been chosen for celebrating perversion in the land of the Crusaders. Bataclan became a symbol of national mourning and resilience. Memorials were held worldwide. Survivors spoke out, and France's government hardened its resolve, launching expanded anti-terror raids and military campaigns abroad. But for the families who lost loved ones, and for the music community around the world, the echoes of that night still remain. London's 7/7 bombings, 2005, United Kingdom. On the morning of July 7, 2005, London was brought to a standstill when 4 coordinated suicide bombings struck the city's public transport system during rush hour. The attackers, all British citizens radicalized by extremist ideology, targeted 3 underground trains and 1 double-decker bus, killing 52 people and injuring more than 700. It was the first Islamist suicide bombing in Western Europe, and it shook the UK to its core. The attacks began just after 8:45 a.m. as morning commuters packed on trains headed for work. 3 bombs exploded within moments of each other in the London Underground system, one near Aldgate, one near Edgware Road, and another near Russell Square. Almost an hour later, the 4th bomber detonated his device on the upper deck of a number 30 bus at Tavistock Square, causing carnage in the city streets. What made the 7/7 bombings especially chilling was that the attackers were not from abroad, but homegrown extremists, young men born and raised in England. In self-recorded videos, they cited the UK's involvement in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan as their motivation. The bombers had reportedly been on the radar of security services, but key intelligence was missed, leading to an intense inquiry into Britain's counterterrorism failures. The aftermath sparked massive changes in UK security policy, improved surveillance, intelligence sharing, and a stronger focus on domestic radicalization. For many, 7/7 marked the end of an age of innocence in Britain, proof that modern terrorism could come quietly from within and strike without warning in the heart of daily life. Charlie Hebdo shooting, 2015, France. On January 7, 2015, two masked gunmen stormed the Paris office of Charlie Hebdo, a French satirical newspaper known for its provocative cartoons, especially those depicting the Prophet Muhammad. Armed with assault rifles, the attackers, said in Sheriff Kouachi, opened fire during an editorial meeting, killing 12 people, including cartoonists, journalists, and police officers. The massacre was quickly claimed as a revenge attack by a branch of al-Qaeda in Yemen, AQAP, which accused the magazine of blasphemy against Islam. The assault wasn't random. It was a direct hit on freedom of speech, designed to intimidate voices deemed offensive to religious extremism. Among the victims were some of France's most prominent cartoonists, symbolizing a targeted blow to French culture, satire, and secularism. As the attackers fled, a related incident unfolded. Another extremist took hostages at a kosher supermarket in Paris, killing 4 more. Together, the attacks left the nation in shock. What followed was one of the largest public rallies in French history. Millions took to the streets under the message, Je suis Charlie, declaring that freedom of expression would not bow to terror. The events ignited global debate, not only about radical Islam and terrorism, but also about satire, offense, religious respect, and the limits of free speech. France responded with an expanded anti-terror crackdown, surveillance reforms, and military operations in the Middle East. But emotionally and ideologically, the Charlie Hebdo shooting became a turning point, a flashpoint where cartoons, ideology, and bullets collided, forcing Europe to confront what it truly values and what it's willing to fight. Bali bombings, 2002, Indonesia. On October 12, 2002, the peaceful tourist town of Kuta in Bali, Indonesia was rocked by a massive terrorist attack that killed 202 people and injured more than 200 others. The victims were mostly foreign tourists, many of them Australians, British, and Americans, enjoying nightlife in one of Asia's most famous beach destinations. The attackers, members of Jemaah Islamiyah, a Southeast Asian terrorist group linked to al-Qaeda, targeted leisure and innocence itself. The assault began when a suicide bomber entered Paddy's pub and detonated his vest inside the crowded bar. Minutes later, a much more powerful car bomb exploded outside the Sari Club, directly across the street. The second blast created a crater 2 meters deep, engulfed the area in flames, and destroyed multiple nearby buildings. A third, smaller device detonated in front of the U.S. consulate, though no one was hurt there. The attack was meticulously planned to cause massive casualties and global attention. Jemaah Islamiyah claimed it was retaliation for the U.S.-led war on terror and aimed to punish Western nations operating in Muslim lands. The bombings left a trail of devastation and sparked deep political and emotional shock, especially in Australia, which lost 88 citizens. Indonesia responded with a major counter-terror crackdown. Dozens were arrested. Several perpetrators were executed or imprisoned. The tragedy marked Southeast Asia's deadliest terror attack and demolished the idea that tourist hubs were untouchable safe zones. In Bali's sand and ash, the world learned that terror can strike anywhere, even in paradise. Westgate Mall Attack, 2013, Kenya. On September 21, 2013, armed militants from the Somali terrorist group Al-Shabaab stormed the upscale Westgate Mall in Nairobi, Kenya, turning a weekend shopping trip into a brutal 4-day hostage crisis. As gunfire erupted and explosions shook the building, terrified shoppers fled, while others were trapped or held at gunpoint. Militants methodically separated hostages by religion, allowing Muslims to leave, while non-Muslims were executed on the spot. By the end of the 80-hour siege, at least 67 people were confirmed dead, with over 200 injured. Victims included Kenyan nationals, aid workers, business people, and foreign citizens. The attackers, heavily armed and trained, held off Kenyan military and police for days, using the mall's maze-like structure to their advantage. Portions of the assault were even recorded by security cameras, later shown in media coverage that stunned the world. Al-Shabaab claimed the attack was a response to Kenya's military intervention in Somalia, warning of further violence unless troops withdrew. But the impact went beyond geopolitics. It was a national trauma. The attack exposed major flaws in security coordination, delayed military response, and internal confusion, with questions still lingering about how many attackers escaped. The siege became a chilling symbol of cross-border terrorism, and Nairobi joined the list of world cities learning that urban centers are not immune to radical violence. In the years since, Kenya has toughened its anti-terror operations, but for survivors and families of the victims, Westgate remains a deep, painful scar and a reminder that terror can strike where you feel most safe.